Okay, let's talk about a big one. If you've spent any time at all in the world of business, you've definitely heard of Good to Great, the legendary book by Jim Collins. It was huge, and it promised this incredible blueprint, right? A set of principles that could take any company that was just, well, good, and turn it into something truly, lastingly great. But the real question is, does that blueprint actually hold up? This is the question that kicked the whole thing off. It's the simple, the profound question that sent Jim Collins and his team on a 5-year research odyssey. They were literally buried in data, trying to figure out what makes great companies tick. And they weren't looking for companies that were just born great. Nope. They were looking for the ones that made a huge, measurable leap and then somehow managed to keep that momentum going. And what a leap it is. We're not talking about a small hop here. It's a massive, challenging climb from that crowded plateau of good enough all the way up to the thin, rarefied air where the true market leaders live. That's the journey we're going to break down today. So here's the plan. First, we're going to unpack the big ideas from the book. Then we'll look at how a real-world investment firm actually put this whole framework into practice. After that, we'll dig into how they manage their investments using these principles. And finally, we're going to ask a really tough question. Is the original blueprint actually flawed? Okay, let's dive into the core concepts, the big ideas that made this book an absolute phenomenon. What did Collins and his team actually find? So first up is this thing called the Hedgehog Concept. It's all about finding that one thing your company can be the absolute best at. And it's not just some random goal. It comes from the dead center of 3 overlapping circles: what you're passionate about, what makes you money, and what you can genuinely be the best in the world at. When you find that intersection, that becomes your simple, powerful, guiding focus. And I love this quote because it just nails the feeling. Collins said it has this quiet ping of truth. It's not some loud, dramatic explosion. It's just a deep, profound sense of clarity. Everything just clicks into place. You know you're on the right track. The second key idea is the flywheel effect. And this one completely shatters the myth of the single aha moment or the one big breakthrough. Greatness doesn't happen overnight. Collins found it's the result of relentless, disciplined effort, like pushing a giant, heavy flywheel. One push at a time, you build momentum, turn by turn. And this visual just perfectly captures it, right? In the beginning, it's a grind. Each push takes a massive amount of effort. But slowly, gradually, momentum starts to build. The wheel starts spinning faster and faster. And then you hit a point of breakthrough, where that momentum is so powerful, it's practically unstoppable. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but how does it actually translate into the real world? Like, with actual money on the line? Let's take a look. Well, check this out. An investment firm named Ambit literally took these concepts and built their entire alpha growth strategy around them. They decided to use Collins's framework not just as a business book, but as a blueprint for finding the next great companies to invest in. And their approach is incredibly disciplined. It's a simple 2-step process. First, you've got the elimination stage. They spend about 20% of their effort here, just quickly weeding out companies from a huge list. But then comes the selection stage. This is where they spend the other 80% of their time, doing super deep research on a much, much smaller group. It's all about focusing their energy where it matters most. And just look at this funnel. It's amazing. They start with this massive universe of maybe 1,000 companies. The first pass gets that down to about 100 or 150. But it's only after that, in the selection stage, that they really zero in on just 20 to 25 companies. That tiny handful is where the real work, the intense research, actually happens. So once they've found these potential winners, how do they actually manage the portfolio? Well, this brings us to a really simple but incredibly powerful metaphor they live by. They use something called a long tail approach. What this means is they don't go all in on 1 or 2 companies. Instead, they make a bunch of small bets, just tiny 1 or 2% stakes across 35 or 40 different stocks. See, they know that with smaller companies, a lot of them just won't make it. The mortality rate is high. So the key here is that they let the stocks prove themselves. The winners basically select themselves by performing well. And that brings us to the core principle, which was summed up perfectly by the legendary investor Peter Lynch: watering the flowers and cutting the weeds. It's so simple. You nurture what's growing strong and you get rid of what's wilting. It sounds easy, but doing it consistently takes incredible discipline. So in practice, what does this look like? Well, when a company delivers a great quarter with strong growth, they add more money to it. They're watering that flower. But if a company's growth starts to sputter and falls short of what they expected, they're out. They sell the position. No hesitation, no getting emotionally attached. They just cut the weed. So we have this powerful framework. We have this incredibly disciplined strategy for putting it into action. It seems totally foolproof, doesn't it? Well, this is where things get really interesting. Let's take a critical look back at where it all started. And here is the big spoiler alert. Years after the book came out, people looked back at those original 11 great companies, and the results were startling. One of them, Circuit City, went bankrupt. Another, Fannie Mae, dropped 99%. So it turns out greatness wasn't quite as permanent as everyone had hoped. And that raises the million-dollar question, doesn't it? If the very companies that were the poster children for the theory couldn't actually sustain their own success, does that just invalidate the whole good to great framework? Was the whole thing just based on luck? Well, the answer is a little more nuanced than that. See, the key takeaway was never about the specific list of 11 companies. That was just a snapshot in time. The real, lasting value is in the disciplined, repeatable process that they used to find those companies in the first place. You know, it's really the difference between a formula and a system. A formula gives you a static list of answers, and that list is eventually going to be wrong or outdated. But a system gives you a dynamic process for finding the answers. It's a framework for disciplined action that can adapt and endure long after those original examples have faded away. And that really leaves us with a final question for you to think about. In your own work, in your investments, maybe even just in how you think about problems. What are you relying on? Are you looking for a quick and easy formula that someone else came up with? Or are you putting in the work to build a disciplined system that helps you find your own answers?